The soft chime above the glass door rang gently as a woman stepped into Lustre Jewelers, one of the city's most exclusive jewelry stores. Everything inside shimmered, bright chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors, and the glass display counters glowed under strategically placed spotlights. Each velvet-lined case displayed diamonds, rubies, and emeralds worth more than most people's homes. It was the kind of place where silence carried a weight of superiority, and the scent of wealth floated in the air like expensive perfume. Clara Bennett, the wife of billionaire entrepreneur Richard Bennett, entered quietly. Despite her husband's immense fortune, Clara had never been one to flaunt wealth. She wore a soft cream sweater, a pair of simple trousers, and comfortable shoes. A thin gold wedding band and a delicate pearl pent around her neck were the only jewelry she had on. Her dark hair was tied neatly into a bun, and though her face carried a natural grace, she looked like an ordinary woman, at least to those who only valued appearances. Clara had come with a purpose. Her daughter's 21st birthday was approaching, and she wanted to buy her something meaningful. Not the flashiest necklace, not the gaudiest ring, but something timeless, something her daughter could treasure forever. She had chosen Lustre because she'd heard they had a collection of rare diamond pendants, each one handcrafted, each one unique. As she walked slowly past the counters, her eyes lit with quiet admiration. She wasn't thinking of prices, only of how her daughter's eyes might sparkle when she received the gift. But her quiet awe was not shared by the staff. Behind the counter, a pair of sales associates exchanged glances. One, a young woman with a sharp bob haircut and crimson lipstick, whispered just loud enough for her colleague to hear, "She must be lost. Look at those shoes. Definitely not our kind of client." Her colleague chuckled under his breath, adjusting his tie. "Probably just here to browse. She won't buy a thing." Clara ignored them, pretending not to notice. She leaned over a glass display case that held a necklace. A delicate platinum chain with a teardrop-shaped diamond that seemed to catch light from every angle. Her heart fluttered. It was perfect. "Excuse me," she said softly, raising her eyes toward the saleswoman with the crimson lipstick. "Could I take a closer look at this necklace?" The woman looked her up and down, her lips curling into a tight, dismissive smile. "That piece is extremely exclusive," she said, emphasizing the words. "It costs more than some people make in a year. Are you sure you want me to take it out?" Clara hesitated. Her cheeks warmed at the condescending tone, but she nodded politely. "Yes, I'd like to see it." The saleswoman gave a small laugh, exchanging another look with her colleague. "I don't think this is in your budget, ma'am. Perhaps you'd prefer something more affordable." She gestured vaguely toward a tray of silver bracelets near the entrance. The kind usually meant for casual buyers who wandered in off the street. A few other customers, well dressed in designer coats and gleaming watches, turned their heads at the conversation. Clara felt their eyes linger, some curious, some amused. Whispers stirred, she wanted to disappear. Still. She tried again, her voice calm though her chest ached. "I'd like to see it, please. I came here for something special." The saleswoman's expression hardened. She leaned slightly over the counter, her voice sharper. "Louder now, enough for nearby shoppers to hear. Madam, this necklace is not for people who can't afford it. We don't want fingerprints on a piece you'll never buy." A laugh slipped from the man behind the counter, and one of the customers smirked, shaking her head. Clara felt the sting deep in her chest, as though someone had slapped her. Her throat tightened, but she refused to let her tears fall. She straightened her back, her dignity holding her upright even as her heart cracked. With a quiet nod, she whispered, "Thank you for your time," and turned to leave. The crimson-lipped saleswoman muttered something under her breath. Something about dreamers wasting time. But Clara didn't respond. The chime of the glass door sounded again as she stepped back into the busy street, the cold air rushing against her face. She walked quickly, clutching her handbag against her chest, fighting the trembling in her hands. The city outside bustled with life, but inside Clara, silence roared. She had been judged not for who she was, not for the love in her heart, but for the shoes on her feet and the simplicity of her clothes. And worst of all, she had let strangers strip her of the joy she felt when thinking of her daughter's gift. Behind her, inside the glittering store, the staff went back to their gossip. Never realizing the woman they had mocked was the wife of one of the most powerful men in the country. Nor that their cruelty would soon return to them in a way they could never have imagined. The heavy door of the Bennett mansion closed softly behind Clara as she stepped inside. The warmth of home embraced her, yet it did nothing to thaw the cold weight pressing against her heart. She paused in the grand foyer, where golden light from the chandelier cascaded down like frozen rain, and exhaled shakily. To anyone else, this home was a palace. Marble floors stretched beneath Persian rugs, framed paintings lined the walls, and tall windows revealed gardens trimmed to perfection. Yet Clara had never measured happiness by walls and wealth. For her, the mansion was not a symbol of power, but simply the place she had raised her daughter, laughed with her husband, and created a life of quiet love. Now, stepping inside after the cruelty she had endured, Clara suddenly felt small, even within her own home. She loosened her scarf, hung her coat on the polished oak stand, and made her way toward the sitting room. She dropped onto the cream-colored sofa, and clasped her hands tightly in her lap. Her knuckles whitened as memories of the jewelry store replayed, sharper with every recall. The raised brows, the smirks, the words. Not for people who can't afford it. Her chest burned with humiliation. She was not a woman who needed diamonds to feel whole, but the sting came from being treated as though she were invisible, unworthy. They had not seen Clara Bennett, wife, mother, human being. They had only seen a woman in modest clothes, and judged her as lesser. A quiet sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Richard Bennett entered the room, loosening his tie after a long day at the office. His presence filled the space with calm authority, but his eyes, deep and searching, softened when they found her. "Clara," he said gently, setting his briefcase aside. "You're home early. Did you find something for Emily's birthday?" At the mention of their daughter, Clara's throat tightened again. She forced a smile, fragile as glass. "Not yet. I didn't find anything suitable." Richard frowned, moving closer. He knew his wife too well. Clara was not one to hide behind half answers, nor was she one to return defeated from a task she held close to her heart. He sat beside her, reaching for her hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, urging her to release the tension in her grip. "What happened?" he asked, voice low, steady. Clara looked away, blinking rapidly. She didn't want to burden him. Richard's days were filled with battles of business, negotiations, headlines. Why weigh him down with the pettiness of a few arrogant salespeople? And yet, the memory was too sharp to swallow. She tried to brush it off. "It's nothing. Just not the right time to shop, I suppose." But Richard leaned closer, his voice firmer now. "Clara, look at me." She lifted her eyes reluctantly. His gaze pierced straight through the mask she tried to hold. He saw the shimmer of tears she hadn't allowed to fall. He saw the pain she tried to bury. He cupped her cheek with his hand, his touch warm and grounding. "You don't have to hide from me," he whispered. "The dam broke." Clara exhaled a trembling breath, her eyes filling. "They humiliated me, Richard." Her words cracked, raw and soft, like porcelain breaking. "In the jewelry store, the one on Fifth Avenue," she continued, voice shaking. "I asked to see a necklace for Emily. And they..." She faltered, clutching his hand tighter. "They laughed. Said it wasn't for people like me. Said I couldn't afford it. They looked at me like I was nothing." Her tears slipped free at last, rolling silently down her cheeks. Richard's jaw tightened, though his voice remained calm. He brushed her tears with his thumb, his chest aching at the sight of her pain. Clara, his anchor, his strength. The woman who had stood by him before the billions, before the empire, before the name Bennett carried weight. To see her dignity crushed by strangers who measured worth in fabric and jewels ignited something fierce in him. "Nothing," he echoed, his tone quiet but edged with steel. "They looked at my wife and saw nothing." Clara shook her head quickly, afraid she had angered him. "Richard, please, it doesn't matter. People like that. They don't know me. They don't know us. I don't want to make a scene. I just wanted to buy Emily a gift." He drew her into his arms, holding her against his chest. "No one humiliates you, Clara. Not while I live." His voice was calm, but underneath, a storm brewed. She clung to him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. His embrace reminded her of who she was. Not the woman those clerks mocked, but the woman he had chosen, the woman he adored. After a long silence, she pulled back slightly. "Promise me you won't overreact," she whispered. Richard gave a small, reassuring smile, though his eyes still burned with quiet fire. "I won't shout. I won't storm. But I will not let them treat you like that. People who build their lives on cruelty must one day face what they've sown." Clara searched his face, knowing that look. It was the look of a man who never raised his voice yet never needed to. A man whose decisions shaped industries, whose quiet words could shift markets. A man who didn't need to demand respect, because it followed him everywhere. She exhaled slowly, leaning into his shoulder. "I didn't tell you so you'd go to war for me," she murmured. "I told you because I needed you to know how small they made me feel." Richard's arm tightened protectively around her. "And I'll remind you of the truth, Clara. You are never small. Not to me. Not to Emily. Not to anyone who truly matters." The warmth of his voice wrapped around her wounds, soothing the sting. She closed her eyes, letting herself believe him. But even as she drifted into his embrace, Richard's mind sharpened with resolve. The jewelry store had mistaken his wife for nothing. Tomorrow they would learn the weight of that mistake. The following morning dawned with a golden haze filtering through the tall windows of the Bennett mansion. Richard Bennett sat at the breakfast table, sipping his coffee in silence. To anyone else, he might have seemed calm. Almost ordinary. Just another man starting his day. But beneath that collected exterior, his mind was already set. He had listened to every word his wife said the night before, memorizing the tremor in her voice, the ache in her eyes. Clara's pain had settled deep inside him like a stone. And Richard Bennett was not a man who left stones unturned. Instead of putting on his usual tailored suit and polished shoes, Richard dressed simply that morning: faded jeans, a gray t-shirt, and a weathered jacket. His shoes were scuffed at the edges, the kind that would never be seen in glossy magazines. He wanted no one to recognize him as the billionaire mogul whose face often appeared on financial covers. Today he was just another man. Clara noticed his outfit as she set down her teacup. Her brow furrowed. "You're dressed differently," she observed softly. Richard gave her a reassuring smile and kissed her hand. "I just have a few errands to run. Nothing you need to worry about." Her lips parted as though to protest, but something in his steady gaze told her not to press. She nodded, though her heart whispered that he was going to the very place she had begged him not to. On Fifth Avenue, the luxury storefront of Lustre Jewelers gleamed beneath the late, morning sun. Its tall glass windows sparkled, drawing in the wealthy like moths to flame. Inside the store was as polished and pristine as the day before, every counter glowing under spotlights, every attendant poised like actors on stage. Richard walked through the glass doors, the bell above chiming softly. He carried himself with calm dignity, though his attire instantly marked him as ordinary. His hair, casually brushed, lacked the polished sheen he wore in boardrooms. His jacket looked out of place amid the furs and suits of the clientele. Almost immediately, he felt their eyes. A sales associate near the counter glanced him up and down, her expression tightening into faint disdain. Another clerk leaned toward her, whispering something behind a hand. A ripple of poorly hidden amusement passed between them. Richard ignored it. His gaze swept the displays, lingering over the same case where Clara had once stood. The diamond necklace, the one that had caught her eye, sparkled beneath the glass, cold and brilliant. He approached the counter calmly. "Good morning," he said. His voice polite, steady. "I'd like to see that necklace, if you don't mind." The associate, a tall man with slicked, back hair, straightened his suit jacket and gave Richard a pointed look. "That piece." He gestured toward the diamond necklace with a smirk. "Sir, that's a high-value item. Perhaps you'd prefer to see something in a lower price range." Richard's lips curved slightly, though not into a smile. "No, that one please." The man chuckled, glancing at his colleague as though sharing a private joke. "Sir, this isn't just expensive. It's exclusive. We don't take pieces like that out for casual browsers." Nearby two well-dressed customers paused to watch, curiosity gleaming in their eyes. One whispered, "Why do they even let people like him in here?" Richard's eyes, calm but unflinching, met the salesman's. "I asked politely to see it. Surely that isn't too much trouble." The man's smirk grew sharper. With all due respect, sir, we value our merchandise. We can't risk fingerprints or accidents with people who clearly aren't here to purchase. His words echoed the cruelty Clara had endured. Richard felt the weight of them settle like iron in his chest. But instead of anger, a cold clarity spread through him. This was no longer about a necklace. This was about arrogance, a disease that blinded people to humanity itself. He nodded once slowly. I understand, he said simply. The clerk raised a brow, clearly pleased with himself, as though he had successfully dismissed a nuisance. Richard turned, walking toward the door without another word. The bell chimed softly again as he stepped back onto the street. The staff chuckled among themselves, their laughter drifting faintly through the glass. None of them had the faintest idea who had just left their store. Richard stood outside for a moment, looking up at the glittering sign above the entrance. Lustre Jewelers. The name itself promised light, brilliance and beauty. Yet inside, he had seen only shadows of pride, greed and cruelty. He slipped his hands into his jacket pockets and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like any other man. But his silence was not defeat. It was patience. For Richard Bennett was not a man who needed to raise his voice to be heard. His voice traveled in headlines, in contracts, in boardrooms. And tomorrow, Lustre Jewelers would learn the identity of the man they had mocked, and the cost of mistaking dignity for poverty. The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across Fifth Avenue. The street hummed with life, cars honking, shoppers bustling, high heels clicking against pavement, and then, the hum was interrupted. A convoy of sleek black SUVs pulled to a smooth stop outside Lustre Jewelers. Their tinted windows gleamed like mirrors, reflecting the golden glow of the city. Security personnel in sharp suits stepped out first, their presence alone drawing stares from pedestrians. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd gathering on the sidewalk. Someone important had arrived. Very important. Inside the jewelry store, the staff carried on as usual. Their laughter still lingering from earlier customers they had mocked. The crimson-lipped saleswoman leaned against a counter, scrolling idly through her phone, while the slick-haired clerk rearranged a tray of rings. Neither noticed the sudden hush outside, until the glass door swung open. Richard Bennett entered, no longer dressed in worn jeans and a gray t-shirt. This time, he was every inch the man the world knew him to be. His tailored navy suit fit perfectly, his polished shoes gleamed, and his silver watch caught the light with understated elegance. His posture carried authority, and his eyes, calm yet piercing, silenced the room without a word. Behind him 2 bodyguards followed in step while another remained at the door. The atmosphere in the store shifted instantly. The sales associates stiffened, unsure why this man looked familiar. Customers whispered, some recognizing his face immediately. The manager, a stout man with thinning hair, hurried forward with a practiced smile. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Lustre. How may we assist you today? Richard's gaze swept the store, his eyes pausing deliberately on the crimson-lipped woman and the slick-haired clerk. Their expressions faltered. A flicker of unease passing over their features as recognition dawned. This was the man they had dismissed, the man they had mocked. Calmly, Richard spoke. Yesterday, my wife came here. The room fell into silence. The saleswoman shifted uncomfortably, color draining from her cheeks. She came to buy a necklace for our daughter's birthday. Richard continued, his voice low, steady, but cutting through the air like a blade. Instead of assistance, she received laughter. Instead of courtesy, she received humiliation. She was told she couldn't afford it. She was told it wasn't for people like her. His words echoed, filling the store with heavy shame. The manager's smile collapsed. Sir, I assure you, this must be a misunderstanding. Richard raised a hand, silencing him instantly. His voice remained calm, but his eyes flashed with quiet fire. I stood in this very store myself this morning. I asked to see that same necklace. And I was treated the same way. Gasps rose from some of the customers, who now clutched their purses and coats a little tighter, shame curling at the edges of their curiosity. The slick-haired clerk stammered. We didn't know. That is precisely the problem. Richard interrupted, his tone sharp but controlled. You did not know who we were, so you assumed we were nothing. You judged by clothes, not character. By appearance, not worth. That is not service. That is arrogance. The saleswoman's lips trembled, her earlier bravado gone. Her eyes darted toward the exit as though searching for escape. Richard stepped closer to the display case, his gaze fixed on the diamond necklace that had started it all. "That necklace," he said, pointing to it. "The one my wife wanted to see." The manager scrambled to unlock the case, his hands trembling. He lifted the necklace carefully and held it out. But Richard shook his head. His voice carried a deliberate authority. "No. You will not hand it to me, you will hand it to my wife, and you will apologize to her, in front of every customer here." At that moment, the door opened again. Clara stepped inside, escorted by another member of Richard's security team. She wore the same modest cream sweater and simple trousers as the day before. But this time she did not walk in alone, vulnerable and judged. This time, she entered on the arm of her husband, and the entire store froze. The saleswoman's face turned pale. The clerk swallowed hard. The manager's hands shook so violently he almost dropped the necklace. Richard guided Clara forward, his voice firm yet gentle when he addressed her. "Clara, yesterday they made you feel small. Today, they will remember your worth." He turned to the manager, his gaze unyielding. "Well." The manager bowed his head, his voice unsteady. "Mrs. Bennett, on behalf of Lustre Jewelers, I extend my sincerest apologies for the way you were treated. It was unacceptable. And I am deeply ashamed." He extended the necklace with both hands. "Please accept this with our regrets." Clara looked at Richard, her eyes wide, her heart racing. She did not crave vengeance, but the dignity of this moment washed over her like balm on an old wound. Slowly, she accepted the necklace, her fingers trembling as she held it. The entire store watched, silent, as Clara turned the jewel in her hands. For the first time, she did not feel invisible. She felt seen. Richard placed a gentle hand on her back, then faced the staff once more. "You should know," he said, his voice calm but carrying undeniable weight. "I am withdrawing every investment my company has in this chain. Effective immediately. I will not support a business that measures a person's worth by the price of their shoes." The words landed like thunder. The staff paled. The customers, sensing history unfold, whispered furiously among themselves. Without another glance at the trembling clerks, Richard offered his arm to Clara. She slipped her hand through his, holding the necklace close to her heart. Together, they walked out of the store, heads held high, as the crowd outside parted in reverent silence. Behind them, Lustre Jewelers stood not as a palace of brilliance, but as a hollow monument to arrogance, one that would soon crumble under the weight of the truth. The convoy of black SUVs pulled away from Lustre Jewelers, leaving a stunned silence behind them. Inside the store, whispers and nervous glances filled the air, but outside, on the busy sidewalk, something different unfolded. Reporters, drawn by the sudden presence of security and the whispers of onlookers, were already gathering. Cameras clicked and rolled as Richard and Clara Bennett stepped into the light. Clara clutched the necklace to her chest, not as a trophy, but as a symbol of something much deeper. Her dignity, restored. Richard guided her gently to the waiting car, but before they stepped inside, a reporter called out, "Mr. Bennett, is it true your wife was humiliated here yesterday?" The question hung in the air, electric. Richard paused, turning to face the cameras. His expression remained calm, his voice measured, but every word struck like a hammer. "My wife came to this store seeking a gift for our daughter," he began, his arm protectively around Clara. "She was treated with mockery, with disdain, with cruelty, and why? Because she did not walk in flaunting her wealth." He looked directly into one of the cameras, his eyes steady. "Let this be clear: wealth does not give a person worth. Nor does the absence of it take it away. If a business cannot understand that, it does not deserve the trust of its customers, or the support of its investors." A gasp and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara felt her throat tighten, not with pain this time, but with gratitude. The man she loved was not just defending her, he was speaking for everyone who had ever been judged, belittled, or ignored for their appearance. Within hours, the story hit the news. "Billionaire's wife humiliated at jewelry store," flashed across screens, followed by videos of Richard's calm but devastating words. Social media exploded with outrage. Hashtags trended worldwide. People shared their own stories of being dismissed, of degraded in luxury stores. The very image of Lustre Jewelers, once a beacon of exclusivity, was now drenched in scandal. A few days later, Clara sat at the breakfast table, the morning paper spread before her. Headlines scream: Bennett withdraws millions from Lustre Jewelers, customers boycott luxury chain after humiliation scandal. We all deserve respect. Richard Bennett speaks out. She looked up as Richard entered the room. His hair still damp from his shower, his tie in hand. He gave her a soft smile and kissed her forehead. "You've seen the papers?" he asked. Clara nodded, her eyes shimmering. "You didn't just defend me, Richard. You gave a voice to everyone who's ever felt small." He chuckled gently, sitting across from her. "I only told the truth. And the truth is, you are worth more than every diamond in that store combined. They should have seen that the moment you walked in." Her heart swelled at his words. For years, she had loved him not for his empire, but for this. The way he saw her, the way he lifted her. The way he reminded her of her own strength. Meanwhile, Lustre Jewelers faced the consequences of their arrogance. Their stocks plummeted. Videos of Richard's confrontation inside the store went viral, replayed millions of times. Customers canceled their memberships. Influencers, celebrities, and even rival jewelers condemned their behavior. Within weeks, the flagship store on Fifth Avenue, once the pride of the chain, was nearly empty. The crimson-lipped saleswoman and slick-haired clerk quietly vanished from their posts, dismissed in disgrace. The manager resigned amid public outcry. For Clara, however, the true justice was not in the store's downfall. It was in walking the streets again, holding her head high, no longer carrying the weight of that humiliation. Strangers who recognized her didn't look at her with scorn, but with admiration. Some even stopped to thank her. "Because of you," one woman told her in a cafe. "I'll never let anyone make me feel small again." Clara's eyes welled with quiet tears as she realized what Richard had done. He hadn't just restored her dignity. He had turned her pain into a beacon for others. On Emily's 21st birthday, Clara placed the diamond necklace around her daughter's neck. The jewel glittered brilliantly under the soft light of their dining room. But the true glow came from Emily's eyes as she hugged her mother. "It's beautiful, Mom," she whispered. "But do you know what's even more beautiful? The way Dad looks at you. Like you're his whole world." Clara's throat tightened. She glanced across the room at Richard, who was watching them with that same soft smile, pride shining in his eyes. She reached up, touching the pendant gently. "This necklace is precious, Emily. But never forget, the most precious thing you'll ever own is your dignity. And you never, ever let anyone take that away from you." Emily nodded, her young eyes full of understanding. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the house was quiet, Clara and Richard sat together in the garden. The stars shimmered above them, and the cool night air carried the scent of roses. Clara leaned against his shoulder, her voice soft. "Do you know what you gave me, Richard?" He kissed the top of her head. "Tell me." "You gave me justice, yes. But more than that, you gave me back my voice. And I'll never forget that." Richard smiled, his arm tightening around her. "And do you know what you gave me, Clara? A reminder of why I built everything I did, not for wealth, not for power, but for you, and for the family we've built." They sat in silence, letting the night embrace them, two souls bound not by diamonds or empires, but by love, respect, and the unshakable truth that dignity is priceless. And far away, Lustre Jewelers crumbled under the weight of its arrogance, while the Bennets walked forward. Together. Stronger than ever.